latke here. And then this is a puffin heart salad garnished with red onion and plum confit. And then for dessert, I've got a cold puffin heart pudding. So I call this introduction for Alex Rigberg Pilot 3 ways. Pilot 1. Did you know that Alex is, literally, well on his way to being a pilot? He's got hundreds of hours of Piper Cherokee flying lessons under his belt. Although it may be basic human nature to dream of flying, few of us actually aspire to it. And fewer still, especially as teenagers, undertake the highly technical and supremely demanding work of learning how. To me, Alex's draw toward obtaining his pilot's license is evidence of several of my favorite characteristics of Alex. A desire for adventure, to go big, to fly outside the confines of this world he's always known. An intellectual approach to study and preparation for the things that inspire him, and a calm, unruffled demeanor that would serve him well in an emergency situation. I don't mean this lightly. If I had to pick a member of this graduating class to pilot a craft on which I was a passenger, I'd pick Alex to have my life in his hands. Just considering some of the other options is terrible. Number 2, pilot episode. The pilot episode of a television show is the creator's first attempt. If the show gets continued, it's because the pilot episode showed great promise. If the show gets canceled, it's because the pilot episode didn't reward its viewers and didn't promise better things to come. It's fun to go back and watch the pilot episodes of Shakers of Promise. You can also see the things that the creators have shed. Pilot episode. He has demonstrated great promise. He's become beloved by students and faculty alike. He's one of those pilot episodes you watch and just know it'll get picked up for The Office. He's funny, but he's full of heart. Of course, there are elements of Alex's pilot episode that he will slough off for his next season at college. Procrastination, maybe? 3, pilot light. According to Wikipedia, a pilot light is a small gas flame, usually natural gas or liquefied petroleum gas, which is kept alight in order to serve as an ignition source for a more powerful gas burner. As anyone who's had class with Alex knows, he often is the pilot light of class discussion. I am not saying that Alex is never the powerful flame himself. Quite often he is. But what I most enjoyed about having Alex as a student is the way he was always there, always tuned in, always glowing with intellect, even if he wasn't torching the place with spoken contributions. The way he received and encouraged others to contribute. The way he engaged and drew out his classmates. The way he peppered conversations with witticisms and insights. It doesn't matter how fine and exotic your ingredients are. You just can't cook without a pilot light. And so I give you, in one of these last moments of his pilot episode, the pilot and the pilot light, Alex Rigberg.
I am not funny. When I approached many of you to ask for advice about my senior speech topic, let's say several weeks in advance, you almost all replied, write something funny. Wow, what an original idea. How? How can I be funny? What does being funny even mean? Why do people think I'm funny? I may have given you some of you the impression by telling a few lucky jokes, but I assure you they were all accidents. So I turned to the internet to teach myself how to be funny. The first explanation I found for why we find things funny is called the incongruity theory. This theory says that a joke is funny when it has a different outcome than we think it will. Our brains are always trying to predict things. When a joke starts, we start trying to guess the outcome. When it ends a different way, our thoughts and emotions change quickly. This results in us experiencing 2 sets of thoughts and emotions at the same time, and we laugh as a way to release the built-up energy that is now useless. Some people argue this is a way for us to realize the flaws in our thinking and allow us to start a new, productive line of thought. One day, the summer of freshman year, a group of us were talking about the World Cup, the event that causes all Americans to join together once every 4 years and pretend they care about soccer. When someone in the group brought up the Brazilian team, one of my friends, who hopefully sees where this is going, don't worry, Mira, I won't tell them it was you, decided she would offer her insight. Oh, she said, much too confidently, there are lots of farmers in Brazil. Her comment was met with blank stares and then violent laughter. I mean, yes, what she said is factually true, but why was it so amusing? Well, with the exception of one of us, we don't relate soccer and the number of farmers in foreign countries. So we found them being connected, amusing. We realized the faulty connection, laughed, and started a new train of thought. But there's another reason we laughed. We found it amusing because it made us feel better than her. It is no question that at some point everyone has found it amusing to watch someone else fail at something or get hurt. These instances of humor are explained by the superiority theory. There are a few reasons given for why this kind of humor exists. Sometimes you take joy in the suffering or shortcomings of others because it makes you feel better about yourselves, because you are all horrible, horrible people. It is also argued that this type of humor exists as a way to correct outsiders' behavior by humiliating them until they conform with the group. But this theory is not completely negative. There are also arguments that small children laugh when they discover the answer to a puzzle or learn how something works because of the sense of achievement they get from mastering something new. Laughing at something makes us feel like we have the ability to rise above it. And so by laughing at our problems, we can make them feel less threatening and to try to overcome them. Still, this theory does not explain why we often respond to seeing someone in pain with grief instead of joy. This hole in the superiority theory is filled by the benign violation theory, or BVT. The BVT has 3 conditions that have to be met for a humorous situation to arise. First, your sense of what the world should be like is threatened by someone or something. Second, the threatening situation is harmless in reality. The last requirement is that you must see both interpretations at the same time. If you were about to be crushed by a steamroller, that would satisfy the first requirement, because I can say with fair certainty that most of you hold the worldview that you should remain not crushed by a steamroller. However, the second point would not be satisfied, because as the shrewd among you may have realized, being crushed by a steamroller poses serious health risks. Let me show you a better example. Now you can see the BVT in action. According to most of your worldviews, people should not throw pencils during their senior speeches. The largest threat the pencil poses to Jonathan is maybe taking out an eye, and an eye patch would contribute a sort of rugged masculinity to Jonathan. So you see these two things conflicting, resulting in humor. The BVT also explains tickling, and I know what you're all thinking, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to tickle Jonathan on stage. When you're tickled, the norm that you don't normally enjoy having someone's hand shoved in your armpit is broken. But because they pose no threat, you laugh, and only when they pose no real threat. Your reaction when someone who you know well tickles you, and when a man with a scruffy beard driving a Chevy Mustang will probably be very different. The BVT also explains why humor is sometimes used to reduce stress, which is explained more in depth by the relief theory. Relief humor is used in stressful situations and manifests itself in jokes about things that some people may feel uncomfortable talking about seriously. This kind of humor provides people a way to bring up these subjects in public, but this type of humor also runs the risk of offending someone if they're not distant enough from the subject of the joke. Distance can be how emotionally attached the audience is with the subject. In a study done by psychologist Tim McGraw, there's a joke in there somewhere, I just can't think of it. He found that people were offended when they heard a church was raffling off a Hummer to recruit new members, but were also amused by it. But most of those who regularly attended church were not amused. They felt connected to the subject, and so were personally insulted. Distance can also be time after a tragic event. After tragedies, many people wonder when it will be too soon to tell jokes about it. This can happen on a personal and societal level. I have experienced this process firsthand, of being unable to laugh at a tragic event, to coming around to seeing the funny side, and even, if I'm feeling particularly strong that day, making jokes about it myself. It's something that's had a huge impact on me, something that immediately after it happened, I don't think I would be able to joke about. But now, after over a year of recovery, I'm ready to see the humor in it. I am, of course, talking about my ID paper. I think Mr. Martin would agree that my ID paper certainly was a tragedy. While I was writing, and I'm using a very loose interpretation of the word writing, if you had cracked a joke about it, I probably would have just gone into a corner to cry. But now, I can laugh at the jokes I got about it in my economics quarter comments. Tragedies can have a similar effect on entire societies. Looking through history, one finds that during times of tragedy, people have always used humor to cope. Even during the Civil War, as our very own Confederate veteran, Mr. Martin, can tell you. People on both sides joke to help them manage their situations psychologically. Soldiers joked that draft exemptions were only given to dead men who could establish proof of their demise by 2 reliable witnesses. Even Lincoln was criticized for telling too many jokes at dinner parties during such a huge crisis. When a businessman approached him and asked if there was any way he could pass through the Union lines to Richmond, Lincoln said, "I've sent 250,000 men there and not one of them has made it yet." People have always used humor to cope with stress. Lincoln says he was so weighed down by the war that if he did not laugh, he should die. After 9/11, probably one of the most traumatic moments for our nation that most of us can remember, many comedians, especially those based in New York, did not know what to do. The Daily Show and The Onion both took a 3-week hiatus after the attacks. When Jon Stewart came back, he gave a heartfelt monologue, but still told a few jokes, saying, "They told us to go back to work, and there were no jobs available for a man crying under his desk in the fetal position." The Onion came back with an entire issue devoted to the attacks with articles like, "Not knowing what else to do, woman bakes American flag cake," and "God angrily clarifies don't kill rule." The Onion received fan mail from readers who told the writers the articles had a cathartic effect for them. But at the same time, Gilbert Gottfried was booed for saying he was taking a flight that was making a stop at the Empire State Building. There was no substance to Gottfried's joke. The Onion and The Daily Show were different, though. They let Americans laugh about how helpless they felt, and about how twisted someone's thinking has to be to justify doing something so wrong. In the end, this is why I think humor is important. While humor can be studied through a scientific lens, it is not a science. Humor is about more than filling in a formula. Timing, tone, audience, body language, even where you are can affect how hard people laugh at a joke, or if they'll laugh at all. You can predict, but not with certainty. This is why I love humor, because of how human it is. Because in the face of tragedy, it can be the only thing that keeps us sane. Because it has the ability to make a complex, often uncomfortable thought or emotion understood with a single sentence, and lets us feel okay about having it. By our very nature, we humans are flawed. We have all felt scared, sad, helpless, inadequate. Humor does something special, though. It allows us to realize just how crappy we are. But it makes us feel a little bit better about it because it lets us all be crappy together. Thank you.